I'm Evelyn Ashford, and this is my cousin Isabel's wedding, the magnificent Drake Hotel, overflowing with fresh flowers, champagne flowing like a river, a perfect setting for love to blossom. But for me, the navy blue dress I spent a week choosing now feels like a giant neon sign, flashing the words, "She came alone in this sea of happy coupled people." There it is. That look. That whisper. They're like invisible needles pricking every inch of my skin. Couldn't even find a date. I can almost hear Bee's voice echoing in my head. The judgment from my family, from the entire Ashford clan, weighs heavily on my shoulders, making me want to find some hidden corner to escape to wallow in my loneliness and fight back the tears threatening to spill. I wonder, does anyone here see Evelyn Ashford, Marketing Director of Innovatech Solutions, who just closed $1 million deal last week? Or do they only see poor Evie, a solo act in a forest of bliss? And then, like a scene from a movie, the ballroom's intricately carved oak double doors swing open. All conversation ceases. Every single eye in the room turns in that direction. A breathtaking silence falls over the room. What is happening? Before I tell you what happened next, the moment my entire world and my family's perception of me changed forever, I'd love to know where you're all watching this story from. Leave your city in the comments below. And if you've ever felt judged by your family for your personal choices, or felt like the odd one out at family gatherings, give me a like. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because trust me, you are definitely going to want to see how this uninvited guest turned everything upside down, and the lesson my family was forced to learn by heart. Growing up in the peaceful but rule-laden suburbs of Chicago, I was always the responsible younger sister, the one who always had to try twice as hard to get a fraction of the recognition Bea got so easily. My parents, Arthur and Eleanor Ashford, had decided early on that Bea was the star of the family. Everything came naturally to her. The lead roles in ballet recitals, straight A's without having to study too hard, and an innate charm that made everyone love her. Why can't you be a little more like Bea? That was basically the soundtrack to my childhood. Meanwhile, my successes, whether graduating with honors in marketing from Northwestern University or climbing my way up to a director position at Innovatech Solutions, all seemed to be just fine, achievements not quite worthy of my family's genuine pride or bragging rights. Work became my reason for being, my safe haven, a place where I could be myself and be recognized for my own merit. And now, in the eye of this familiar storm of judgment and loneliness, a mysterious figure appears. Who is he? Why does his presence command the silence of the entire room? And more importantly, what does he have to do with me, Evelyn Ashford, the woman just trying to find her footing at her own cousin's wedding? Let's pull back the curtain on this mystery. To better understand the suffocation I felt at Isabel's wedding, it's probably best to start with the fact that my family, the Ashfords of suburban Chicago, has always had a star and a satellite. My older sister, Beatrice, or Bea, was that brilliant sun. Everything seemed to come to her without the slightest effort. Lead roles in school plays, straight A's without late-night studying, and an innate charm that made everyone fall in love with her. Why can't you be a little more like Bea? That question from my father, Arthur, or my mother, Eleanor, became the sad soundtrack to my entire childhood and adolescence. When Bea was crowned prom queen, my parents threw a lavish party. When I won a prestigious scholarship to Northwestern University, I got a brief "well done" during dinner. When Bea got engaged to Spencer Lockwood III, the son of one of Dad's important business partners, my mother cried with joy for days. And when I earned a coveted position at Innovatech Solutions, a top tech company, on my own merit, that achievement was only mentioned as a minor footnote during Sunday dinner. Work became my reason for living, my safe haven, a place where I could be myself and be recognized for my abilities. But my private life was another story. Daniel. We had been dating for 3 years, and I had naively believed he was the one, until the day I discovered his 6-month-long affair with a colleague. "I didn't mean for it to happen," Daniel had said, as if those words could lessen the pain of betrayal. It's just, we connected. The worst part wasn't the affair itself, but the realization of how blind I had been, how I had painted a future with someone whose mind had long been elsewhere. The past 8 months have been a time of healing a broken heart, focusing entirely on work and refusing all offers of dates or setups from well-meaning friends. My recent promotion to senior marketing director coincided with my cousin Isabel's engagement announcement. Izzy and I had been close as kids, spending summers playing at our grandparents' house on Lake Michigan, building sandcastles, catching fireflies. But as we grew up, our paths diverged. Izzy pursued fashion design, while I dove into the competitive world of marketing. We still texted on birthdays and occasionally met for coffee, but the close bond of our childhood had faded with time and distance. When Izzy's wedding invitation arrived, with that dreaded +1 option, my stomach clenched. I considered asking a friend to pose as my boyfriend, but ultimately decided against perpetuating another lie. I went dress shopping by myself, choosing an elegant A-line navy blue dress with delicate beading, enough to complement my hazelnut hair and blue eyes, but not flashy enough to attract unnecessary attention. The pre-wedding events were a special kind of torture. At Isabel's bachelorette party, my Aunt Penelope, after gifting the bride a set of risque lingerie, looked directly at me and said to the room, "Maybe we should save a few sets for Evie, for when she finally has a need for them." The room erupted in laughter while I forced a smile, my cheeks burning with humiliation. My best friend, Chloe Vance, a sharp and pragmatic lawyer, even suggested I hire a high-end escort. "Just to save face, Evie," she said during our weekly dinner. "No one would know." "I would know," I replied, my voice weary, "and I'm so tired of pretending to be someone else to please my family." The morning of the wedding, I woke up early, spending more time than usual on my appearance. I styled my hair in soft waves, applied natural makeup to highlight my eyes, and put on the chosen dress. Standing before the mirror, I practiced confident smiles, trying to remind myself of my own worth. "You are successful, smart, and perfectly whole on your own, Evie." I whispered to my reflection, trying to believe it. The taxi ride to the Drake Hotel in downtown Chicago was filled with anxiety. My hands fidgeted with my clutch as the Chicago skyscrapers slid past the window. When the car stopped before the grand main entrance, I hesitated for a moment before getting out. For a split second, I considered telling the driver to take me home, to make up some emergency excuse. But no, I paid the fare, took a deep breath, and walked through the ornate doors alone. The Drake's ballroom was breathtaking, despite my encroaching anxiety. Giant crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow on elaborate arrangements of cream and blush flowers. Round tables surrounded a gleaming dance floor, each set with fine china and magnificent centerpieces. A string quartet played softly in a corner as guests milled about, chatting. My arrival immediately caused a ripple of whispers. Uncle Walter, who I guessed was 3 drinks in based on his flushed face, didn't even bother to lower his voice. Still single at her age. Such a shame, isn't it? All that education and no one to share it with. Aunt Penelope descended on me instantly. "Evie, darling, alone again? I know some very nice men. Let me introduce you. There's my dentist's son, divorced twice but very stable now. Or my neighbor's grandson, he's only 22, but they say age is just a number." I mumbled some polite thanks, my eyes scanning the room for a friendly face or a discreet corner. Instead, I saw my sister, Beatrice, approaching, resplendent in a designer blush pink dress that probably cost more than my month's rent. Her blonde hair was swept into an intricate updo, diamonds glittering at her ears and throat. Spencer Lockwood III hovered nearby, scrolling through his phone with the bored expression of a man who would rather be golfing. "Evie," Bea air-kissed my cheeks. "That dress is practical, a smart choice so you can wear it to the office." She glanced around pointedly. "Couldn't find anyone willing to be your +1? I told Mom you'd probably come alone." Before I could respond, my mother, Eleanor, appeared, elegant in a slate blue gown, her platinum hair in a perfect chignon. "Evie, darling, you look lovely." Her eyes held that familiar look of pity, the same one she gave me when I didn't make the cheerleading squad in 9th grade. It's perfectly fine to be independent. Not everyone needs a partner to feel complete. Her tone implied the exact opposite. The wedding coordinator, a harried-looking woman with a clipboard and a Bluetooth earpiece, approached. "Miss Ashford, please allow me to show you to your table." She led me across the room to what was clearly the singles table. a motley mix of the elderly, widowed Mrs. Ainsworth, 16-year-old cousin Finn glued to his handheld gaming device, and the recently divorced, whiskey-scented cousin Caleb. "Congratulations on the promotion!" Mrs. Ainsworth practically shouted, her hearing aid whistling. "Your mother says you're so busy with work. Is that why you haven't found a husband yet?" I reached for my water glass, nearly knocking over my champagne flute. "I love my job," I managed to reply, then took a long sip to avoid further explanation. The official ceremony that followed was heartbreakingly beautiful. Isabel, my once little cousin, glided down the aisle in a custom-designed wedding gown, her face radiant with happiness as she joined Owen at the altar. Their vows were personal and touching. Speaking of partnership and unconditional support, I was genuinely happy for her, even as an uninvited melancholy crept into my chest. The moment they shared their first kiss as husband and wife, the room erupted in applause, and I clapped along, trying to hide my own sense of isolation. The cocktail hour took place immediately after in another, smaller but no less elegant hall. I proactively chose a strategic position near the snack table, a small plate in my hand filled with stuffed mushrooms and spanakopita. At least the food gave me something to focus on, instead of the painfully obvious absence of a partner by my side. But that peace didn't last long. "When are you going to settle down, Evie?" My mother's cousin Matilda suddenly appeared beside me at the lobster display. "Your biological clock isn't getting any younger, you know." I managed a polite smile, mumbling something incoherent about "still looking." Before I could escape from cousin Matilda, Uncle Walter, my father's golf buddy, approached, holding a bacon-wrapped scallop. "Any prospects on the horizon?" he asked, his tone conspiratorial. "You know, my friend's son just got divorced. A bit older, but he's got a very stable career. Owns 3 car dealerships." By the 6th unsolicited suggestion regarding my love life, I felt I couldn't take it anymore. I hastily made an excuse and practically fled to the ladies' room, locking myself in a stall until my breathing steadied. Standing before the large marble mirror, I gently dabbed at the tears threatening to fall, careful not to smudge my meticulously applied mascara. "Get it together, Evie," I whispered to my tired reflection. "Their opinions do not define you." I pulled out my phone, calling Chloe Vance from a discreet velvet armchair in the restroom's lounge area. "Chloe, they're acting like I have a terminal illness called being single," I lamented, my voice full of desperation. "Remember, Evie," Chloe's voice came through the line, firm and motivating. "Their reaction says more about them than it does about you. You're catching flights. They're catching feelings about your personal choices. Stay strong." Armed with a little borrowed confidence from Chloe's advice, I took a deep breath and returned to the party. But immediately, Beatrice intercepted me, a glass of champagne in hand, her smile somewhat forced. "You really should get out there more, Evie," she said in a worldly wise tone. "Have you tried the dating apps? Even people in difficult situations find someone suitable." I tried to smile. "I'm focusing on my career, Bea." "That's what all the single girls say when they can't find anyone," she replied with false sympathy, patting my arm. Just then, the DJ's voice boomed over the speakers. "All the single ladies, your attention, please. It's time for the bouquet toss." His eyes scanned the crowd and seemed to linger on me for a moment too long. "Don't be shy, beautiful ladies." 3 of my aunts, including Aunt Penelope, practically frog-marched me towards the gathering group of single women, mostly Isabel's younger cousins and her college friends. "Go on, Evie! Maybe catching it will change your luck!" Aunt Penelope even gave me a little shove forward. I stumbled into position, keenly aware of every eye in the room on my back as Isabel prepared to toss her magnificent bouquet. A hush fell over the crowd. Suddenly, Isabel stopped mid-spin, the bouquet still clutched in her hand. The grand oak double doors at the main entrance to the ballroom swung open dramatically. The string quartet faltered, missing a beat in Pachelbel's Canon in D. A man stood silhouetted in the doorway, tall, imposing, in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. His dark hair was styled with a refined but natural look, and his jaw was so sharp it could cut glass. He surveyed the room with an easy confidence, as if he were assessing a boardroom, not interrupting a wedding reception. "Is that Julian Hawthorne?" Someone whispered rather loudly to my right. "The tech billionaire? What's he doing here?" another voice mumbled. Isabel and Owen looked at each other from the altar, confused. They clearly weren't expecting a guest of his caliber. Julian Hawthorne's eyes swept methodically across the room, then paused and locked with mine. A flicker of something, recognition or interest, crossed his face. With purposeful strides, the man named Julian Hawthorne crossed the ballroom. The crowd of guests who had just been whispering now parted to let him pass, like the Red Sea for Moses. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drumbeat as he drew closer. His eyes, a striking slate gray, intelligent and with a hint of something playful, never left mine for a second. He stopped directly in front of me. At his towering height, about 6'2", he loomed over my own 5'6" frame, even in heels. This close, I could see the sharp lines of his face more clearly, and the confidence that radiated from his every move. Before I could collect myself or utter a single word, Julian reached out and gently took my hand. His touch was warm and surprisingly tender. "Sorry I'm late, darling." His voice was deep with a slight rasp, loud enough for the curious guests nearby to hear. The traffic in downtown Chicago was terrible. Then, he leaned in and placed a light kiss on my cheek. A subtle cologne, a blend of sandalwood and something distinctly masculine, drifted past my nose. I stood frozen, the shock and confusion rendering me completely speechless. Even breathing felt difficult. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my sister, Beatrice, literally gawking, her perfectly painted red lips forming a comical O. My mother, Eleanor, who had just been looking at me with pity, was now sitting up straight, an impossibly radiant smile replacing her usual look of concern. "Just play along," Julian whispered in my ear, his warm breath sending an unexpected shiver down my spine. "You look like you could use a rescue. I'll explain later." My mind raced with 1,000 possibilities. Was this a mistake? A prank? Some elaborate setup? But there was something in his steady gaze, in his directness, that conveyed an indescribable sincerity, like a lifeline thrown just as I was drowning in a sea of family judgment. And in a moment of desperation mixed with curiosity, I decided to grab it. I didn't think you were going to make it," I heard myself say, surprised at how stable my voice sounded. Julian's smile was dazzling, his white teeth stark against his slightly tanned skin. And miss this? Never. He gently slid a hand around my waist, a gesture that was both protective and vaguely possessive. Just then, Isabel, the bride and my cousin, approached, her beautiful, glowing face filled with even more curiosity. "Evie, you didn't tell me you were bringing such a distinguished guest to my wedding." Julian gallantly extended a hand to shake Isabel's. "Julian Hawthorne, congratulations on your beautiful wedding, and my sincerest apologies for my tardiness. An important international business call ran longer than expected." He turned to me with a look of feigned affection that was incredibly convincing. Evie had me down as a +1, but she wasn't sure if I'd make it back in time. "Of course, any friend of Evie's is always welcome," Isabel said enthusiastically, then waved over the nearby wedding coordinator. "We're going to need to rearrange the seating a bit." Within minutes, I, who had just been exiled to the lonely singles table, was being formally escorted to the VIP area, near the head table. Julian's hand remained lightly at my waist as we walked, a strange, warm pressure that felt both foreign and somehow familiar from a man I had essentially just met minutes ago. The atmosphere around me seemed to have completely transformed. The whispers were still there, but now they were tinged not with pity or ridicule, but with curiosity, admiration, and perhaps a little bit of envy. The change in my family's attitude was instantaneous and dramatic, as if an invisible switch had been flipped. Beatrice, my sister, who had just been looking down her nose at me, suddenly appeared at our VIP table almost immediately, her face trying to feign a casual indifference. "Evie," she began, her voice impossibly sweet. "I had no idea you were dating someone, let alone someone so successful and charming." "You never asked, Bea," I replied simply, feeling a strange new confidence welling up inside me. "Julian," Bea said, turning to him and batting her eyelashes, "what field are you in, exactly?" Spencer Lockwood III, her husband, stood nearby, scowling, clearly unhappy with his wife's enthusiastic display towards another man. Before Julian could answer, my mother Eleanor appeared, nearly pushing Bea aside. "Our Evie has always been the intellectual of the family, Julian," she announced with a radiant smile, as if she'd spent years being proud of this fact, rather than constantly lamenting my lack of social grace compared to Bia. Graduated with top honors in marketing from Northwestern, you know. Once we were settled at our new table, Julian leaned towards me. "We should probably nail down some basic details," he whispered, his voice low enough for only me to hear. "How long have we been dating?" 3 months, I whispered back, trying to keep a straight face. "Where did we meet?" 3 months sounds about right, Julian said. "Not so new that it needs a lot of explanation, but not serious enough that you would have had to introduce me to everyone before this. Perfect." He thought for a moment. "We met at the Chicago Children's Fund Gala back in March. I was impressed with your marketing insights. First date was dinner at Alinea." I blinked, surprised by the specificity. Alinea was one of the most expensive and difficult to book restaurants in Chicago. "How did you know I work in marketing?" A slight smile touched Julian's lips. "Your name tag at the gift table. Evelyn Ashford, Senior Marketing Director, Innovatech Solutions." I just filled in the blanks. His quick wit and observational skills were both impressive and a little intimidating. When it came time for the toasts to the bride and groom, Julian gently tapped his champagne flute against mine, a playful, knowing glint in his eye that sent a surprising flutter through me. For a moment, I forgot this was all an act, that this handsome, successful man wasn't really my boyfriend, that we were performing an elaborate play in front of hundreds of guests. A pang of guilt crept in. Was I any better than my ex, Daniel, with his lies? But I quickly reassured myself this was different. It wasn't hurting anyone, and it would be over in a few hours. Nothing more than a funny anecdote to tell Chloe tomorrow. And yet, when Julian smiled at me, a genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes, something in my chest stirred, an emotion that had nothing to do with our fabricated relationship. Julian expertly pulled out my chair for me as we returned from the buffet, his gentlemanly manner completely unforced. As we sat down to eat, he leaned in again, his voice low and private. "I heard your sister's comment when you arrived," he admitted, a flicker of anger in his expression. "The one about not being able to find a date. That was completely out of line." "That's Bia for you," I said with a practiced shrug, trying to hide the old sting. "She's been the family favorite since we were in the womb. She was born first and has been in the lead ever since." "Are you two twins?" Julian's eye browed up in surprise. "No, she's 2 years older, but she never lets me forget those 24 extra months of life experience." I took a sip of champagne. Anyway, enough about my family. I think I should know a little something about the man I've been dating for 3 months, beyond the sensational headlines about a tech billionaire. Julian smiled, deftly cutting into his prime rib. "Self-made, if that means anything," he said. "Started coding when I was 13. Sold my first security software company at 25. Founded Hawthorne Innovations 3 years ago." He paused. "The media inflates the billionaire number a bit. It's really more like, only a few 100 million? How disappointing," I teased, surprised at how comfortable I felt talking to him. He continued, taking no offense. "I put myself through Stanford on scholarships and ramen noodles. First-generation college student. My parents are teachers in Oregon." "That explains the lack of rich guy entitlement," I observed. "I also built my marketing department at Innovatech from the ground up with increased customer engagement by 30% last quarter." "That's impressive," Julian said, and unlike when my family said it, he actually sounded like he meant it. "What's your specialty?" "Digital, traditional, integrated campaigns with a focus on multi-platform storytelling. Our last campaign for Horizon Software hit 60 million views and went viral." Julian's eyes lit up. "Was that the one about the grandmother who learned to code to create a memorial website for her late husband? That was yours? A brilliant emotional touchpoint, beautifully integrated with a real-world application showcase." For the next 20 minutes, we were engrossed in a discussion about marketing strategy, his insights surprisingly sharp and deep for someone outside the industry. The conversation then shifted to indie films. We both loved the work of an obscure female director named Emilia Santiago. Then to contemporary art. He collected emerging artists, but admitted to not understanding experimental installations. And then to travel. Our conversation flowed surprisingly well. Julian asked me about my travels, and I shared about my time studying abroad in Barcelona. I did a semester at Universitat Pompeu Fabra in the spring of 2015, I recounted. Julian's eyes widened slightly. Really? I did an exchange semester at IS Business School in Barcelona, also that same spring. We probably walked right past each other on Las Ramblas without even knowing it. It's a small world, I murmured, wondering at the strange coincidence. It added a little spice of fate to our charade, even though I knew it was just random chance. Just then, the DJ announced that the dance floor was open. Julian stood up, gallantly offering his hand to me. "Shall we make this performance a little more convincing, Miss Ashford?" he asked, a playful smile on his lips. I hesitated for a moment, then placed my hand in his. On the dance floor, his hand rested lightly on my waist, the other holding mine with a comfortable confidence. He moved with a natural rhythm, leading without being overbearing, perfectly adjusting to my every step. We looked like a couple who had danced together many times, not two strangers who had just met an hour ago. "You're a very good dancer," I said as he skillfully led me through a turn. "Mandatory ballroom lessons since I was 12. My mother's orders." Julian's smile turned a little mischievous. She always dreamed of raising a perfect gentleman. "Well, she succeeded," I blurted out before I could stop myself. His eyes met mine, and I saw a warmth flash in their depths. The feeling of his hand on my waist was becoming strangely right, and also increasingly dangerous. Uninvited, the memory of Daniel's betrayal flooded back. The shock of discovering the affair in his texts, the shattered trust, the humiliation of being so easily deceived. I couldn't forget that all of this was just pretend, no matter how real it felt. When the song ended, Beatrice and Spencer approached, Spencer's expression making it clear this wasn't his idea. "Julian," Bea's smile was a bit stiff, but she tried to sound friendly. "Evie mentioned you work in tech. Spencer's father is looking to diversify his investment portfolio. Perhaps you could share some insights." Julian expertly fielded their questions about market trends and potential growth sectors, his knowledge both broad and specific. I stood beside him, silently admiring how he handled Spencer's increasingly technical questions without a hint of hesitation. "How did you two meet, anyway?" Bea suddenly asked again, her tone suggesting she was probing for inconsistencies. "At the Chicago Children's Fund Charity Gala at the Art Institute," Julian replied instantly, without missing a beat. Evie was representing Innovatech Solutions. She made a very insightful comment during one of the panels that caught my attention. I went up to introduce myself afterward, and we talked until they practically closed the place down. The fabricated story sounded so plausible that for a moment, I almost believed it myself. My mother, Eleanor, joined our circle, her eyes alight with approval as she looked at Julian. "Evie told me you might not make it tonight," she said to Julian, her voice intimate. "Something about Tokyo, was it?" I froze. I had never said that. But Julian didn't flinch. "It was Singapore. Actually, ma'am," he replied, his tone perfectly natural. The merger negotiations wrapped up just in time for me to catch the last flight back. He placed a hand on the small of my back possessively. Couldn't let Evie down. My father, Henry Abbott, who had previously barely registered my existence, suddenly took a keen interest. "Julian," he said, extending his hand. "Henry Abbott, a pleasure to meet you. Tell me about your company, Hawthorne Innovations. My firm is looking to upgrade its cybersecurity." As Julian began the conversation with my father, I caught a glimpse of Bea watching us with narrowed eyes, clearly trying to reconcile the image of the little sister she always dismissed with the woman who had just captured the attention of one of Chicago's most eligible bachelors. Her face was a mask of suspicion and perhaps a little resentment. After my father, Henry, finally released Julian from the barrage of questions about Hawthorne Innovations, Julian skillfully guided me to the bar. He ordered a sparkling water for himself and, surprisingly, a Pinot Noir for me, correctly guessing my favorite wine without having to ask. "This is absurd," I chuckled softly as I took the wine glass from him. "My family just did a complete 180. Suddenly, I'm the interesting daughter." "You were always the interesting daughter," Julian replied, his voice warm. "They just failed to notice." Something in his tone made me look up at him intently. "That's a very kind compliment for someone you just met," I said, trying to probe. Julian's gaze was steady. "You're quick on your feet, articulate, and didn't hesitate to play along with a complete stranger in an awkward situation. That shows intelligence and adaptability. Both are very interesting qualities." Before I could respond, Julian's phone buzzed. "Excuse me," he said, glancing at the screen. "I need to take this. A company emergency." I watched him step away, his voice on the phone focused and authoritative. The moment Julian was out of sight, Beatrice materialized beside me like a ghost. "So, Julian Hawthorne," she said, her tone laced with sarcasm as she inspected her fresh manicure. "A little too convenient, isn't it? You come here alone, and suddenly you're arm in arm with one of America's most eligible bachelors." "What are you implying, Bea?" I asked, trying to remain calm. "I'm just surprised, that's all," Bea shrugged. "You've never mentioned him once during family dinners. Mom had no idea you were dating anyone, and then he shows up at the most dramatic moment possible." "We wanted to keep things private," I replied, feeling my defenses rise. "Unlike you, I don't need to flaunt every detail of my relationship to seek validation." Bea's eyes widened slightly at my uncharacteristic sharpness. "Well, touchy subject." "No," I said, my voice firmer. "I'm just tired of you constantly trying to belittle me. For once, I'm happy. Why can't you just support me?" "I am supportive," Bea protested, though her tone was unconvincing. "I just find it odd that after what happened with Daniel—" "Don't!" I cut her off, my voice turning cold. "Don't you bring him into this." Just then, Julian returned and naturally sliding his arm around my waist. "Everything all right here, ladies?" he asked, looking between the two of us. "Perfect," Bea replied with a saccharine smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just catching up with my little sister." As Bea walked away, Julian led me back to the dance floor as a slow, melodic song began. This time, he held me a little closer, and our conversation shifted to more personal topics. "Families can be complicated," Julian said as we swayed gently to the music. "My younger brother isn't thrilled with my success. He thinks everything came too easily for me, despite having watched me work 80-hour weeks for years." "Sounds familiar," I admitted, a flicker of sadness passing through me. "The hardest part is that I still look for their approval, even when I know I'll never fully get it." "The curse of the responsible child," Julian agreed, always trying to earn the love that should be given freely. During dessert, we shared a chocolate mousse, our forks occasionally touching by accident. His fingers brushed against mine as he passed me a napkin, the touch lingering just a fraction of a second too long. The simple contact sent a wave of warmth through my chest. I felt increasingly confused about the line between pretense and reality. Was the admiration in his eyes genuine, or just brilliant acting? Was my own growing attraction real, or simply a reaction to finally being seen after years of being invisible to my family? We were sharing the last bites of the chocolate mousse, our forks occasionally touching playfully, when Julian's phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen, and I saw a flicker of concern cross his face. "Edward, my business partner," he explained briefly. "There's an urgent situation with our Asia-Pacific division that needs to be handled immediately." "Go ahead," I said, trying to sound understanding of the demands of a high-level job, though a little knot of disappointment formed in my stomach. Julian's call lasted several minutes, and I watched his expression grow more serious. When he returned to the table, an apology was written all over his features. "I really have to step out to handle this, Evie," he said, his voice full of sincere regret. "I promise I'll be back as fast as I can." A knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. Was this his exit strategy? A convenient emergency to escape from this charade? I tried to keep my voice even. "I understand. Business first, right, Julian?" He took my hand, and his touch this time sent an electric flutter up my arm, a feeling I tried to ignore. "I will be back. I'm not." He seemed unusually flustered, as if searching for the right words. "Please, believe me." I just nodded, not daring to speak, afraid my voice would betray the chaotic emotions inside. As I watched him walk quickly out of the ballroom, I realized with alarming clarity that I was starting to develop real feelings for a man who was still essentially a stranger, a man who was playing a role in a complex play of our own making. The wedding speeches began just after Julian left. Isabel, the bride, glowed with happiness beside the groom. Owen, thanking everyone for coming to celebrate with them. The best man gave a heartfelt speech about friendship and love, then raised his glass in a toast. "And if any special guests would like to share a few words," he announced, his eyes scanning the room, "we'd love to hear from you." My sister Beatrice's eyes immediately locked onto mine, her expression full of challenge. She even gave a slight nod toward the microphone being passed around. Clearly expecting me to embarrass myself trying to explain Julian's sudden absence. The microphone started making its way around the room, and I felt my heart trying to leap out of my chest as it got closer and closer to our table. I was completely frozen, panic rising in my throat. What could I possibly say now without exposing the entire charade? "I'd be honored," a deep, familiar voice said from behind me. "Julian!" He had returned without me even noticing. So quietly, it was startling. A wave of overwhelming relief washed over me as he calmly took the microphone from the server. "Isabel and Owen," Julian began, his voice confident yet warm. "Although I've only had the pleasure of meeting you both today, I can clearly see the genuine connection you share. A real connection is a rare thing in this world." His eyes found mine for a brief moment, a look full of meaning. When we find someone who sees us for who we truly are, someone who challenges us to be better while still accepting us for our flaws, that is something truly worth cherishing, worth celebrating, and worth fighting for. He raised his glass. "To Isabel and Owen, and to the genuine connections we're lucky enough to find, wherever they may be." His simple but meaningful speech received a warm round of applause. As Julian sat down beside me, our eyes met with a surprising intensity, as if something unspoken had just passed between us. My initial feeling of relief was now replaced by an even stronger flutter of emotion. This man, despite having just dramatically entered my life, had a strange magnetism and an understanding that seemed to go far beyond the role we were playing. After the speeches ended and the applause died down, Julian leaned toward me slightly, his eyes glancing toward the glass doors leading to the terrace. "Shall we get some fresh air?" he suggested. The terrace of the Drake Hotel overlooked a part of Lake Michigan and the glittering skyscrapers of the Chicago night. A gentle May breeze carried a cool, fresh dampness. We stood next to each other by the stone balustrade, in a moment of almost complete privacy amidst the noisy party. The air between us was surprisingly comfortable. "I have to confess something," Julian said suddenly after a pleasant silence. "To be honest, I didn't originally intend to stay at the wedding this long." My heart sank a little. I understood. The play was about to end. "I get it," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "You've already helped me more than I could ever expect from a complete stranger." "No, that's not what I mean," Julian explained quickly. "I was at this hotel this afternoon for a business meeting in the presidential suite. When the meeting ended and I was about to leave, I happened to overhear your sister's comment as you entered the ballroom. It bothered me, the casual cruelty in it. I studied his profile in the soft light of the terrace lamps. So this was a spontaneous act of chivalry? Rescuing the poor, single woman? A hint of defensiveness was unmistakable in my voice. "No," Julian said firmly. He paused for a moment, seeming to choose his words carefully. "It was because I recognized you." "Recognized me?" I was surprised. "From where?" "From the Digital Marketing Innovation Summit in Austin, Texas last October," he said, and I could see a slight smile on his lips. "You gave a presentation on emotional storytelling in the age of AI. Your case study on humanizing AI through interactive campaigns was brilliant." I stared at him, stunned, unable to believe what I was hearing. You remember that? That presentation?" "You were wearing an emerald green blouse that perfectly matched your eyes," Julian said softly, his gaze warm. "And you handled the Q&A with incredible intelligence and grace, even when that guy from Microsoft tried to undermine your methodology." "That was almost 8 months ago," I said, still dazed that someone like him could remember such details about someone like me. "I had intended to introduce myself after your presentation, but you were surrounded by too many people, and then my flight got moved up." His gaze on me was steady. "When I saw you tonight in that situation, it felt like, I don't know, a serendipitous second chance, perhaps." My mind tried to process this new information. "So, when you walked in and pretended to be my boyfriend," I said slowly, It wasn't entirely out of altruism. I admit, Julian said, a half smile playing on his lips, I regretted not being able to meet you properly in Austin. Tonight, for me, felt like a second chance. Before I could reply, the terrace door swung open and Beatrice appeared, her timing as impeccably awful as ever. There you two are! Her voice was artificially cheerful. Mother is looking for you, Evie. Something about family pictures. Julian nodded politely. We'll be right in. But Bea didn't move. You two seem awfully close for a couple that's only been dating for 3 months, she said, her voice dripping with suspicion. Almost as if you've known each other much longer. Or maybe, not at all. My stomach tightened. B, not now. I'm just saying everything seems perfectly convenient, Bea continued, her sharp eyes darting between Julian and me. Almost too perfect. Julian stood up straighter, his easygoing manner vanishing. Is there something you're trying to say, Beatrice? Just that my sister never mentioned you before tonight. Not once. And then you suddenly appear like Prince Charming at the exact moment she needs to save face. Forgive me if I'm a little skeptical. Bea, I warned, feeling the situation spiraling out of control. Julian's jaw tensed slightly. I travel frequently for work. We wanted to keep our relationship private while we figured out where things were going. Is that so? Bea's smile turned sharp as a knife. Then why did the concierge tell Mom you were escorted straight from your business meeting to this ballroom? It seems you asked where the Ashford Lockwood wedding was being held. Her eyes lit up triumphantly. You two just met tonight, didn't you? Julian and I exchanged a look, caught in our own lie. I knew it, Bea said, her voice full of contempt. Just wait until everyone finds out how desperate Evie was to avoid showing up alone. It wasn't like that, Julian protested. It was my decision to step in, not Evie's. Oh, so you're some kind of wedding-crashing white knight? Bea laughed. Please. A wave of hurt and humiliation washed over me. What started as a rescue now felt like a pathetic act of charity. You don't have to defend me anymore, I said to Julian. Taking a step back, the show is over. The show is over, I repeated, my voice trembling slightly but my eyes locked on Julian's, trying to hide the chaos inside me. The terrace floor felt like it was shaking beneath my feet. Evie, Julian said, his voice earnest, taking a step toward me. Tonight, for me, was more than just an act. Right, I replied bitterly, trying to use sarcasm to mask the hurt. You felt sorry for the poor single woman being ridiculed by her family. A great knight in shining armor moment for you, wasn't it? That's not fair, Evie, Julian countered, frustration clear in his voice. You know what happened between us tonight was more than that. What exactly happened, Julian? I shot back, my voice rising. We were acting. You played your part convincingly. Congratulations. We connected, he insisted. Our conversations, the things we shared, that wasn't acting. Not for me, at least. How can I trust anything that happened in the context of a lie? I demanded, my voice full of desperation. I just got out of a relationship built on deceit. I'm not exactly eager to jump into another one. The pain from Daniel resurfaced, making me even more defensive. Julian's expression softened. I'm sorry about what happened with your ex. Trust is fragile, I get that. But I'm not him, Evie. You're right. You're not, I agreed, but with a different meaning. At least he let me know the real him before he betrayed me. Julian flinched, as if I'd slapped him. I saw a flash of hurt in his eyes. Before he could respond, the terrace door opened again, and Freddie, Julian's business partner, appeared, looking frantic. Julian, sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation that can't wait. The team in Singapore is on the line, and that deal is in danger of falling apart completely. Julian looked torn, his eyes shifting between Freddie and me. Evie, please, he said, his voice pleading. Can we talk after I handle this? I think we've said enough, I replied, crossing my arms over my chest, trying to project a cold exterior. You should go. Your real life is calling. The pain on Julian's face was evident, but Freddie was already pulling him away, rattling on about contract terms and deadlines. I watched him disappear through the door, a strange mixture of relief and loss washing over me. The show had truly ended, in a way far worse than I could have imagined. I allowed myself 5 minutes alone on the terrace, trying to take deep breaths to gather what little composure I had left before I had to face the ballroom again. The music and laughter drifting from inside now sounded like torture. When I turned to go back in, Beatrice and my mother, Eleanor, were waiting just inside the door, their expressions grim. "Evie, what is going on?" My mother demanded an immediate explanation, her voice stern. "Julian just left with another man. Is everything all right?" Before Bea could launch into her gloating exposé, I made my decision. Better to tell the truth myself than to have it twisted by someone else. "Julian and I just met tonight," I admitted, my voice surprisingly steady despite the humiliation burning in my chest. "He happened to overhear Bea making fun of me for coming alone, and he stepped in to help. His company emergency is real. He's the CEO of Hawthorne Innovations." My mother's face fell. The earlier pride had vanished completely, replaced by heavy disappointment. "Oh, Evie," she sighed, "why would you lie to your family like that?" "I didn't plan this, Mom. It just happened." "Things don't just happen, Evie," my mother said, her voice weary. "This is exactly the kind of impulsive behavior your father and I have always worried about. First that marketing job instead of law school, then moving to Chicago by yourself." I stopped hearing my mother's familiar litany of my perceived failures. My eyes focused on Bea, who was whispering to a nearby cousin, undoubtedly spreading the news of my humiliation. Within minutes, I could feel the weight of pitying stares from across the room. The shame was even worse than when I had first arrived. I tried to ignore my mother's familiar words, her criticisms of my impulsiveness and poor choices. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Beatrice whispering with another cousin, no doubt recounting her version of events, embellishing my humiliation. Within minutes, I could feel the weight of pitying, curious stares from across the room bearing down on me. This felt even worse than when I had first arrived, when I was merely the lonely single one. Now, I was also a liar, someone so desperate she had to invent a scene. I found a way to skirt the edge of the ballroom, my nearly untouched wine glass in hand, my eyes constantly checking the clock. 9:45 p.m. Still too early to leave without causing more gossip. But every minute that passed under the weight of my family's judgment, now multiplied by the exposure of the fake charade, felt like an hour. At exactly 10:30, I couldn't stand it anymore. I decided I had to leave. I approached Isabel, who was still glowing with happiness on the dance floor with Owen. "Izzy," I said, forcing a smile, "I'm not feeling very well. I think I have to head home early." Isabel frowned with a little concern. "So early, Evie? What about Julian? Is he coming back?" "A company emergency," I replied, the lie now rolling off my tongue with frightening ease. "He sends his apologies." Isabel's expression shifted to one of knowing sympathy. "Well, that's the curse of dating ambitious men. Anyway, thank you so much for coming, Evie. It means so much to me that you were here." I gave my cousin a hug, truly happy for her, even in the midst of my own chaos. "Congratulations, Izzy. You and Owen are truly a perfect match." As I slipped quietly out of the ballroom, I could still feel the weight of the whispers and the stares at my back. Once again, I was Evelyn Ashford, lonely, pitiful, and now with the added humiliation of being caught in a desperate lie. I was leaving in an even worse state than I had arrived. The early morning sun streamed through the curtains of my Lincoln Park apartment, illuminating the tiny dust motes dancing in the air. I had barely slept, replaying the events of the wedding in my head like a uniquely mortifying film. The coffee maker gurgled as I leaned against the kitchen counter, trying to summon some energy for the new day. My phone buzzed with a text message. An unknown number. "Evie, it's Julian. I got your number from the wedding coordinator. I'm truly sorry about last night, both for having to leave suddenly and for how things ended between us. The work situation was real, but I should have handled it differently. I'd like to explain properly, if you'll let me." I stared at the message, not knowing how to reply. Part of me wanted to delete it and pretend the entire evening never happened. Another part wondered what difference any explanation from him could make now. I put the phone down without replying, needing more time to get my head straight. 20 minutes later, my doorbell rang. Chloe Vance, my best friend, was standing in the hallway, holding a pink pastry box and wearing an expectant look. "I come bearing chocolate croissants and your favorite almond pastries for the official post-wedding press conference," Chloe announced, breezing past me into the apartment. "Now, spill. How bad was it?" I laughed, though it sounded a bit hysterical even to my own ears. Oh, Chloe, where do I even begin? And then, over hot coffee and sweet pastries, I recounted the entire horrific evening. My family's treatment of me, being seated at the singles table, Julian's dramatic appearance, our on-the-fly fabricated relationship, the genuine connection I felt blooming, Beatrice's exposé, and Julian's abrupt departure. Wait, Chloe interrupted, holding up a hand. Julian Hawthorne? As in, the Julian Hawthorne who donated $50 million for affordable housing in Chicago last year? That Julian Hawthorne? I nodded, picking at a croissant. And he pretended to be your date because he saw your sister making fun of you, and then later revealed he actually remembered you from a conference 8 months ago where he even noticed the color of your blouse. I nodded again. Evie, Chloe said, her voice full of disbelief. That's not a red flag. That's a literal romance novel. A classic meet cute. He lied, Chloe, I pointed out, to help you, Chloe countered. And then he came clean about his reasons. He could have just kept up the act and tried to get your number later without ever revealing he knew who you were. I hadn't thought of it that way. Even if his intentions were good, I said, still skeptical, it doesn't change the fact that we built a connection on a foundation of deceit. After Daniel, I can't. Daniel deliberately cheated on you for months, Evie, Chloe said gently. This is completely different. Julian created a charade to save you from public humiliation, and then was honest about his motives at the first opportunity. Chloe's words struck a chord, making me question my own reaction on the terrace last night. Had I been too harsh, projecting Daniel's betrayal onto a completely different situation? I need to deal with my family first, I finally decided. Whether or not anything happens with Julian, I can't let B's behavior continue. Chloe squeezed my hand. It's about damn time, my friend. Chloe's words echoed in my head. Julian created a charade to protect you, and then was honest about his motives. Maybe I had been too quick to judge, too quick to let old wounds from Daniel cloud my ability to see a completely different situation. But before I could think any more about Julian Hawthorne, I knew I had to do something more important, confront my family, starting with Beatrice. I couldn't let their behavior continue, couldn't let their condescension and judgment keep eroding my confidence and happiness. Encouraged by Chloe, I summoned the courage to text B, suggesting lunch at a neutral cafe, halfway between my apartment in Lincoln Park and her home in the upscale Gold Coast. I was prepared for a refusal or a delay, but to my surprise, Bea replied almost immediately, "Fine, tomorrow at 2. 2 hours later, we were sitting across from each other at a small window table, an awkward silence hanging between us. Bea looked tired, the dark circles under her eyes not fully concealed by her makeup. She continuously stirred the ice in her iced tea, avoiding my gaze. Last night was really humiliating, I finally said, my voice calm but firm, breaking the silence. Not just because of the Julian thing, but the way you treated me from the moment I walked in the door. The comments about me being alone, about my dress, about my career choices, it's a pattern that's been repeating for a long time, B, and I've had enough. Beatrice kept staring into her tea, her long fingers gripping the glass. I know, she said quietly, her voice almost a whisper. You know? I asked, unable to hide my surprise at her lack of a typical defensive retort. Bea looked up, and I was genuinely shocked to see tears welling in her eyes. I'm jealous of you, Evie, she confessed, her voice trembling. I have been for years. Jealous of me? The concept was so absurd I almost laughed. Bea, you're the family princess. You're beautiful, successful, with a perfect husband and a perfect life. A sad smile flickered across Bea's lips. My marriage is falling apart, Evie, she said, her voice so low I had to lean forward to hear. Spencer has been having an affair with his assistant for over a year. I found out 6 months ago. I leaned back in my chair, stunned. Bea, who always seemed so perfect, who had everything, was dealing with such a bitter reality. Bea, I had no idea. No one does, she said, trying to keep her voice from breaking. We're pretending everything is fine while we go to marriage counseling. She twisted the wedding ring on her finger. And your career? You built everything from scratch. You're respected for your mind, for your talent. Me? I married Dad's golf buddy's son, and I play tennis at the country club. I have no identity beyond being Spencer Lockwood's wife. But Mom and Dad always favored you, I countered, trying to reconcile this new perspective with decades of my own experience. They expected different things from us, Evie, Bea corrected, her voice tired. They pushed me toward marriage and social connections, and they pushed you toward academics. Neither of us really got to choose our own path. We talked for nearly 2 hours, peeling back the layers of misunderstanding and unspoken rivalry that had defined our relationship since childhood. For the first time, I saw my sister as a complex human being with her own private sorrows, not the perfect nemesis I had built up in my mind. "I'm sorry about the Julian thing," Bea finally said. "I shouldn't have exposed you like that. It was cruel." "It was," I agreed, "but maybe it was also necessary. We can't build relationships on lies, whether it's love or family." A hesitant but real smile appeared on Bea's lips. "Does that mean you might give him a chance? Julian, he seems to really like you, Evie. The way he looked at you wasn't fake at all." "I need to clean my own house first," I replied, though Julian's text was still there, lingering in the back of my mind. There's still a lot to sort out. My next stop, after the surprising lunch with Bea, was my parents' familiar home in Evanston, a quiet suburb of Chicago. The classic colonial house looked exactly the same as it had throughout my childhood. The meticulously tended garden, the rocking chairs set just so on the porch, and the American flag flying by the door. A feeling of both familiarity and strangeness washed over me as I raised my hand to ring the bell. My mother, Margaret Abbott, opened the door, her face showing a flicker of surprise to see me there. "Evie, we weren't expecting you. Is everything all right?" she asked, a note of concern in her voice. "I need to talk, Mom," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "With you and with Dad, with all of us." The atmosphere in the familiar Abbott family living room in Evanston grew tense as I sat across from my parents. The late afternoon sun slanted through the windows, highlighting the tiny dust motes dancing in the air, as if time had stood still here for a very long time. This was the place I grew up, a place that held both sweet memories and simmering hurts. The conversation was difficult. Decades of unspoken resentments, of unmet expectations, were finally voiced by me. Bravely, I explained to my parents how their preferential treatment had affected both Beatrice and me, how their constant comparisons had inadvertently dug the rift between two sisters who should have been each other's biggest supporters. "We just wanted what was best for you both," my mother tried to justify, though the certainty in her voice had begun to waver. "You wanted what you thought was best," I corrected gently, without ever really asking what we wanted for ourselves. "You and Dad imposed your own expectations on us, without realizing that each person has their own path, their own definition of happiness." To my surprise, my father, Henry, always a man of few words and rather conservative, spoke up in my defense. "The girl has a point, Margaret," he said, his voice thoughtful. "We pushed Bea toward Spencer Lockwood because we thought he represented security and status. And look how that's turning out. And we didn't encourage Evie's marketing ambitions because we didn't understand it, yet she's very successful and independent." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "I never meant to make you feel less than, Evie," she said, her voice choked with emotion. I was just worried you'd be lonely, that you'd have no one to lean on." "Being lonely isn't the worst thing, Mom," I replied, my voice softer. "Being in the wrong relationship or living a life that isn't your own, that's much worse. I need you and Dad to respect my choices, even if they don't perfectly align with what you envisioned." By the time I left my parents' house, something had truly shifted. There was no magical solution or dramatic movie-like apology, but there was a significant step toward mutual understanding. A new beginning, however fragile, was still a beginning. I felt a sense of relief, as if a great weight had been lifted from my heart. As I was driving back to my apartment in downtown Chicago, feeling somewhat lighter, my phone rang through the car's Bluetooth system. The name of Isabel Izzy, my newlywed cousin, flashed on the screen. "Evie," Izzy's cheerful voice came through the line. "I wanted to thank you again for coming to our wedding the other day. Having you there really meant a lot to me." "It was a beautiful ceremony, Izzy," I replied, smiling. "You and Owen look absolutely perfect together." Speaking of perfect together, Izzy's voice suddenly turned teasing. "Julian Hawthorne called us this morning. He was asking for your contact info. Owen almost fell off his chair when he realized who was calling him. My heart skipped a beat. Julian, he hadn't given up. He texted me this morning, I said, trying to keep my voice even. And what did you say? Izzy asked, not hiding her curiosity. Nothing yet. It's complicated, Izzy. Life is always complicated, Izzy laughed. But a connection like the one I saw between you and him last night, whether the relationship was fake or not, that's rare. Don't let it go, Evie. As I pulled into the garage of my apartment building, my mind a jumble of thoughts, I suddenly saw a familiar figure waiting near the elevator entrance. Julian Hawthorne. As I stepped out of the elevator into my building's garage, my heart was still pounding from Isabel's call and the thoughts of Julian. And then I truly froze. Julian Hawthorne was standing there, hands in the pockets of his jeans, wearing a simple button-down shirt instead of last night's formal suit. His hair was slightly messy, as if he'd run his hands through it in frustration. He straightened up as he saw me approach. Evie, he said first, a slight smile on his face. Thanks for not calling security on me for waiting here. How did you know where I live? I asked, though my voice lacked the sharpness it might have had last night. The exhaustion from the talk with my parents and what Bia had confessed seemed to have softened my defenses. Isabel, he admitted. I hope that's okay. I really wanted to apologize to you in person. We stood there for an awkward moment. I didn't know what to say, and he seemed to be waiting for my reaction. Finally, I gave a slight nod toward the elevator. Do you want to come up? We can talk more comfortably. In my apartment, I offered Julian a glass of water, the only thing I could think of at the moment. He accepted it politely. We sat on opposite ends of the sofa, the space between us filled with unsaid words. I'm sorry about last night, Evie, Julian began, his voice sincere. For having to leave so suddenly, and for how things ended between us on the terrace. The work situation was real. A deal in Singapore my company has been chasing for 3 years was in danger of collapsing. But I should have handled everything differently, especially with you. I overreacted too, I admitted, looking down at my own intertwined fingers. What happened with Daniel? My ex-boyfriend? It's made me hypersensitive to anything that feels like a lie. I understand, Julian said, carefully placing his glass on a coaster. The truth is, Evie, I've thought about you occasionally since that conference in Austin. Your presentation was excellent, but it was more than that. There's a rare authenticity about you, a naturalness. When I saw you at the wedding last night, looking so fragile yet so dignified, despite how your family was treating you, I acted on instinct. It probably wasn't the most conventional way to reintroduce myself, but why didn't you just introduce yourself normally at the wedding? I interrupted, the question I'd been asking myself all night. Like, hi, Evie. I saw your presentation last year. I'd love to chat. Julian smiled a little sheepishly. In hindsight, that probably would have been a more rational approach. But when I heard your sister's comment and saw the look on your face, I just reacted. I wanted to flip the script for you, to give you a moment where you held the power. It was certainly a dramatic entrance, I admitted, a small smile touching my lips unexpectedly. I want you to know that what I said on the terrace was sincere, Evie, Julian continued, his gaze earnest, with no trace of pretense. The connection we had last night, our conversations, the dances, our shared observations, for me, that wasn't an act. I want us to be able to start over properly this time. No audience, no pretense. I looked at him intently. This man, who had turned my humiliation into one of the most memorable evenings of my life, who had seen me at a professional conference and remembered the color of the blouse I was wearing 8 months later, who was now sitting on the modest sofa in my apartment, looking at me as if I were something precious, not something broken. I'm scared, I admitted, my voice a soft tremor. After Daniel, I built very high walls around myself. It's safer that way. Safer, maybe, Julian's voice was gentle. But lonelier too, right, Evie? I'm not asking for anything more than a chance. One real date. If there's nothing there without the drama of last night, then we'll know. The logical part of my brain listed all the reasons to say no. Our unconventional beginning, my recently broken heart, the complications of his high-profile, wealthy life. But another part, a part that had been suppressed for too long, whispered of possibilities, of a glimmer of hope. One dinner, I finally agreed, a small but genuine smile appearing on my lips for the first time in a long while. A proper first date at last. No pretending we've known each other before. Julian's smile was radiant, and I felt it was worth every risk. I love that. He reached out his hand, and I hesitantly placed mine in his. The touch was warm and steady. As our fingers laced together, it felt both brand new and familiar, like the beginning of something real, something right. 6 months later, I stood on my parents' porch in Evanston, watching Julian pull his familiar car into the driveway. Thanksgiving at the Abbott house, a tradition I had often dreaded, felt completely different this year. Julian got out of the car, carrying a bottle of wine and the pumpkin pie we had baked together that morning, his smile warming me against the Chicago November chill. "Ready for this?" he asked, wrapping an arm around my waist as we walked up to the porch. "More than ever," I replied, leaning into him slightly before ringing the doorbell. The past 6 months had truly transformed my life in ways I never could have anticipated. Our first real date after Isabel's wedding had been at a small, cozy Italian restaurant in Lincoln Park, where we talked nonstop until the owner politely informed us they were closing. Unlike the performance at the wedding, this time everything was real. From the initial awkward silences and the delightful discoveries about each other, to the thrilling energy of a true beginning. Our second date was at an indie film festival, featuring the latest work from Emilia Santiago, a director we both loved. We passionately debated the film's ending over dessert, a debate that left us both feeling exhilarated instead of annoyed. By the third date, I knew something special was happening. We had our first real fight 6 weeks in, when work commitments forced Julian to cancel plans at the last minute. Instead of letting the annoyance simmer as I might have in the past, I told him directly how disappointed I was. He listened, validated my feelings, and we found a compromise that respected both our needs. That resolution taught me more about a healthy relationship than my years of previous dating ever had. My best friend, Chloe Vance, approved of Julian from their very first meeting, not because of his wealth or status, but because of the way he listened intently when she spoke about her passion for environmental law. "He actually sees people, Evie," she told me later. I also had the chance to meet Frederick Freddie, Julian's business partner, and got more insight into the world Julian constantly navigated, the high-stakes decisions, the responsibility for thousands of employees' livelihoods, and the pressure of relentless innovation. Instead of finding his work intimidating, I found I could offer marketing perspectives that he genuinely valued. When Hawthorne Innovations launched a new user security platform, Julian integrated several of my suggestions into the rollout strategy. 2 months ago, I had officially introduced Julian to my family over an intimate dinner. The difference in their reception of him compared to Isabel's wedding, while subtle, was significant. This time, their interest seemed more sincere than opportunistic. Julian still fielded their questions, with the same patience and grace as he had at the wedding. But now there was no performance, no need for a fabricated story. The door opened to reveal Beatrice, my sister, but without Spencer by her side. After months of counseling, they had decided to separate, a decision that seemed to have lifted a great weight from her shoulders. BA had enrolled in interior design courses at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, pursuing a passion she had abandoned after college. "Happy Thanksgiving," Bea said, giving me a warm hug, then turned to Julian with genuine friendliness. "Mom's been talking about your pumpkin pie since you called yesterday. No pressure." Inside, the house was filled with the familiar holiday spirit. My mother, Margaret, hugged Julian as if he were already family, while my father, Henry, clapped him on the shoulder with unusual enthusiasm. "Evie was just telling us about your new security initiative, Julian," my mother said, leading us into the living room. "It sounds fascinating." Actually, it was Evie's insight that user trust is the most valuable asset that shaped the entire campaign, Julian replied, the pride in my contribution evident in his voice. Throughout dinner, I observed the subtle shifts in the family dynamic. BA and I shared private jokes instead of passive-aggressive barbs. My mother asked thoughtful questions about my recent projects at Innovatech Solutions. My father expressed sincere interest in both our careers, with none of the judgmental comparisons that used to be his trademark. When Julian stepped outside to take a short call about a system update, my mother leaned toward me. "He's wonderful, Evie. You two look so happy together." "We are, Mom," I confirmed, the simple truth of it still surprising me sometimes. "I'm sorry I ever made you feel like you needed someone to be complete," she said softly, her voice full of sincerity. "You were always whole. I see that now." Later, as we were driving back to the city, Julian took my hand and rested it on the center console. "Your family is really changing." "They're trying," I agreed. "It's a process." "Speaking of family gatherings," Julian said casually, "my parents are coming to Chicago for Christmas. They'd love to meet you." "Meeting the parents?" I teased. "That's a big step." "One of many I hope we'll take together," his voice grew more serious. "I was thinking we'll probably be attending another wedding soon." My heart skipped a beat. "Oh, Freddie's getting married in June," he explained with a mischievous smile, though something in his eyes suggested a deeper meaning. "Though who knows what other ceremonies might be on the horizon for us?" I squeezed his hand, a feeling of pure contentment washing over me. 6 months ago, I had walked into a wedding alone, filled with dread at my family's judgment and pity. That humiliating evening became the catalyst for change in my relationship with my sister, with my parents, and most surprisingly, with myself. Standing alone finally gave me the strength to find a true partnership. Not because I needed to be completed, but because I finally understood my own worth. That unexpected encounter changed everything. Not because Julian rescued me, but because the experience empowered me to rescue myself. As the Chicago skyline appeared before us, glittering in the night, I realized I was truly grateful for the moment my family had laughed at me for showing up alone. Without their judgment, I might never have found the courage to demand better from them, from my relationships, and from myself. Sometimes the most painful moments lead to the most profound transformations. Sometimes you have to stand alone to discover you were always whole.